Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming the Honorable Joseph R. Biden, Jr.
Thank you very much. Madam President, does this mean I get to go to the parties tonight? Across the street. Madam President, Rabbi Dr. Axelrad, Sarah, you said that wordsmiths greater than you were going to be speaking today. I don't know where the hell they are. Members of the board, faculty, parents, grandparents, spouses, the rest of you who worked your way through your graduates' 4 years or more here. And my fellow confrere today, Leo, I want to personally say I'm flattered to be in your company and to thank you for your incredible work on dealing with the pandemic this world faces with AIDS, HIV, and tuberculosis and malaria. We just passed a bill the other night through the United States Senate, which was much less than it should have been. And we're going to rely on you, Leo, and other leading activists, business leaders, and humanitarian forces in the world to give it some life. And I look forward to working with you. You know, this is somewhat intimidating speaking before. I've done many commencements at many great universities, but never have I done a commencement speech where those who preceded me, each one of whom spoke, their speaking could have sufficed for the commencement speech, and have done it well. And to speak to a group of young people who people in my business seek to hire, seek to look for help, communicators, professional communicators, and artists, this is somewhat intimidating. You're a remarkable class. I spoke at a major state university yesterday, a commencement speech, attended my daughter's commencement the day before from Tulane University, and I've spent little time on college campuses in this town and around the nation. But the most remarkable thing about your class is you arrived here in large part possessing what most people go to college to find, and that is you know what you love, you know what matters to you. Most of you are prepared to take the chance of pursuing, in a very difficult environment, a competitive environment, the craft that you know you love. My dad, who just died, used to have a saying, you know, I'll bet each of you graduates today can come up with 2 or 3 sayings you've heard your mother and father repeat dozens of times. My dad used to say, it's a lucky person who gets up in the morning, puts both feet on the floor, knows what they're about to do, and thinks it still matters. Most people spend their entire life searching for the thing that makes them feel whole. Most people spend their entire lives, even those who were by society standards extremely successful, trying to find something they love and love to do. You start out with an overwhelming advantage. You know, looking back in my commencement, the only thing I can remember for certain about my commencement is I can't remember who the hell my commencement speaker was. I cite that to point out to you I have no illusions today. And by the way, let's get one thing straight. Dennis Leary, Jay Leno, Henry Winkler, and you got me? What? I don't get it. Any of you of the class of 2004 in here? I would make my tuition contingent upon getting one of these guys as my commencement speaker. Anyway, I'll give it my best. I'll try to be concise and informative and keep what Steinbeck would call the hoop-de-doodle, that is, those descriptive passages that add nothing of content, to a minimum. Let me begin by saying what is so trite to say, but is heartfelt by all those in this magnificent theater, and that is congratulations. This is an exciting day in your lives, a day to celebrate the possibilities, a time to think about what you're going to do and how you're going to try to do it, to imagine the adventures life will bring, and I can assure you there will be many, some planned and many completely unexpected. My mother, God love her, we're about to celebrate her 85th birthday, would tell you if she were here today that although in high school I was, but in law school I wasn't the best of students, she always believed that I and any of her three other children could do anything at all that they wanted to do. She believed that I could become anything I wanted. She even believed I'd run for president once. She never thought I'd be dumb enough to try it twice. But the bottom line is, my mom, God love her, Jean Finnegan Biden, still believes. She believes with an absolute steadfastness, a blazing clear faith, that we are capable of doing anything we set our minds to. Today, that seems like an awful simple and, I guess, trite thought. And like many simple thoughts, it proves to be profoundly, comprehensively true. With your degree from Emerson, even without your degree from Emerson, particularly with your degree from Emerson, quite simply, you're positioned to be able to do anything you want to do. But fate will intervene. And some of you it will be harder, and for some of you it will be easier. But the first thing that I have to say to you today is decide. Decide if you can. That's why I said you have such an advantage, this class. Decide what it is you want to do. Whether you want to write the great American novel that my son wants to do, one of them, whether you want to produce a hit movie, win an Academy Award, be the best sports broadcaster there is, not only dream it, go and do it. There's another core belief that I have from my mom to you. She believes that of every bad thing that happens, to you, and some bad things have happened to you and will happen to you, she genuinely believes that of every bad thing that will happen, something good will come if you look hard enough for it. And I found that that's a pretty important notion, as preposterous as it seems. Because the journey you're about to undertake is going to be filled, as I said, with a lot of rewards, but a heck of a lot of surprises. There'll be boundless hope, but there's also going to be extraordinary challenges. And you're just flat out going to have to deal with them. You have no choice. And if you encounter those disasters in your life from the perspective that that's all they are, you are likely to have great difficulty working your way through them. They are opportunities, just like my dear mom says. And I predict to you something that you will not remember, but someone else may repeat it to you sometime during the rest of your life. I predict to you, when you look back on your life, the things that will have made the difference between whether you have succeeded in your mind, not society's, yours, or failed, will not be the roadblocks that were thrown in your way, but how you dealt with them, whether you dealt with them. Look back on your life now. Think of every single time you have sought the prize, whatever it was, and did not succeed, and someone else succeeded. I suggest you all have learned by now that the person who succeeded was not necessarily more talented than you, was not necessarily more gifted than you, was not swifter than you, but that they had more confidence than you. And they had an attitude that they could. I've mentioned my mother for a couple reasons. Not merely because she's a special person, but because she represents a different time in America, an analog time, when life was simpler on the surface and the more important sense of community was greater. Her sayings and observations are not very different than what you've heard your grandparents, many of whom are in this audience, say. They may not seem as important today in this fast-paced lifestyle of the digital age. In fact, they may seem almost quaint in the world of the American Idol and the Osbournes. Hers are personal values that sprang from family, neighborhood, and the faith she practiced. And it all added up to one thing. You are your brother's keeper. And that it's in our self-interest to be of service to our brothers and sisters. When Mom was growing up in Scranton, Pennsylvania, it made a difference whether her next-door neighbor, Johnny Colligan, lost his job. It made a difference whether or not Mrs. Flynn had breast cancer. It made a difference in the neighborhood. And it required everyone in the neighborhood to be of some service, even if it was merely a kind word. Service wasn't a career, it was an expectation, an essential part of living a meaningful life. In a sense, helping the guy next door is sort of a uniquely American value, born out of the fact that we're a nation of immigrants. When our parents and grandparents came here, whether they were Jews from the Lower East Side of Manhattan or Italians of the North End or Portuguese in Fall River or Irish in Scranton, we had to stick together. We had to help each other. It was how we survived. It was how we bonded. It was how we developed a sense of belonging in the neighborhood and in the nation. Today, a whole lot of people don't even know who the hell their neighbor is and could, quite frankly, care less to their own detriment. Most of you are probably not going to choose the course I've chosen. Most of you are more talented than I am, so you'll have other options. And I'm sure many of you hold what I do in relatively low esteem. Politicians, in my antecedent occupation, lawyers, are not the most popular people in America, and with good reason. But my course of life was carved out like yours will be, in large measure, by the way I was raised, the opportunities I had, and the times in which I lived, just as yours will be carved out by these most extraordinary of times. For me, I came of age in the shadow of the Civil Rights Movement. I remember the images of Bull Connor in Birmingham, Alabama in '63, using fire hoses and dogs against elderly women marching in their Sunday best. 2 months before my graduation in 1968, I was sitting in an airport lounge waiting for a plane in Syracuse when I heard that Martin Luther King, one of my heroes, had been gunned down on a balcony in Memphis. That night I listened to the extemporaneous words of Robert Kennedy when he said, "In our sleep, pain which cannot forget falls drop by drop upon the heart until on our own despair, against our will, comes wisdom through the awful grace of God." And I thought, my God, what grace can God bestow in this circumstance? 2 days before I graduated from law school, I remember being physically shaken by the footage of Robert Kennedy, one of my heroes, lying in a pool of blood on the floor of a kitchen in the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles. And as we sat to receive our diplomas, listening to a speaker I cannot remember, most of us knew that our first employer was going to be Uncle Sam in Vietnam. 1968 was a cataclysmic year. Not merely because of these tragedies, but because we lost the very people we thought were going to change the world we wished to change. When you started high school and here, there were nothing but good times ahead. Life seemed absolutely filled with hope. The stock market was up, the Berlin Wall was down, the sky was the limit, peace seemed inevitable. We were looking at governmental surpluses, the budget was balanced, we were filled with hope and optimism. And then the impeachment and disgrace of a president, and many other things intervening, culminating in your sophomore year on September 11th with the witnessing of an evil that most in this country thought was beyond our shores. In a sense, it was like 1968 again. Every generation that does much is challenged by the events of their youth. Every generation is shaped by such events. And they have the benefit, as my mom would say, if you look at the good thing that's in this tragedy, they renew our resolve, they remind us of our core values, and in a sense, they call us to action in 1,000 different ways. And your generation is no different. All the talk about the X generation and the Y generation of you having been coddled and not being able to meet adversity, etc., is so much crap. I went on show after show after show, and if I heard one more announcer say to me, I finally got myself in trouble with Peter Jennings when he was talked about this generation's incapability of accepting this challenge. And I repeated myself, and he asked me again, I said, what don't you understand about my answer? Every single generation of Americans, including yours, when pressed, has risen to the challenge. And the notion that you cannot handle this new world we find ourselves in, all of us find ourselves in, I find preposterous. We no longer have soccer moms living in our suburban counties. We have security moms. We no longer have people wondering whether or not we are impervious to being struck by a terrorist. We have people who assume out of all proportion that they're likely to be the victim of terror. And you, those of you who are communicators as a profession, and artists and actors, you have a phenomenal opportunity, a phenomenal capability to put this country back in perspective. For quite frankly, and I mean this absolutely sincerely, the country will listen less to me or to President Bush than it will to the well-placed and well-timed comment of Jay Leno or David Letterman on the nightly entertainment shows. It will matter more whether you're honorable, decent, and reasonable commentators, because you will get more face time and more of your words will be heard by the President, by the United States of America, than by the President of the United States. The Annenberg School of Journalism, where my son attended and I spoke at their commencement at Penn, did a study. And for a 10-year period during a presidential election, the amount of time on the nightly news the primary candidates, they're not primary, the candidate, the president and or his challenger, got for any action taken was on average 7 seconds. The commentator, those of you who train these young women and men, their average time was 2.5 minutes on the same subject. So you have great power. You have great power, inordinate power, and an inordinate responsibility. And I'm banking on the fact that your generation, having been shaped by the recent events of your life, being better educated, more technologically advanced, is poised to do whatever has to be done, like I would argue previous generations have. I dare say I think you'll do it better. You take your diplomas and enter a world that is awesome in its chaos and complexity, as it is starkly beautiful in its seeming simplicity of its great technology. I know that you are today very much as we were in 1968, anxious about the future and dismayed by uncertainty, wanting to do well, wanting to do good, and unsure about your chances of doing either. I know, and this is the one thing I ask you to take from me on faith today, that neither your optimism nor your pessimism enables you to predict your future. It will enable you to deal with the consequences that befall you, but not to predict your future. But I also know, and I believe this as absolutely as I believe anything, that only a confident, optimistic attitude enables you to take a hand in shaping your future and in turn mine and my children and grandchildren. We didn't understand this 35 years ago any better than I suspect you do today. We were sobered by what we could see ahead. But even in the face of that upheaval that characterized our world in 1968, we still graduated, and it seems implausible now, but graduated with this overwhelming sense of purpose and confidence that we could change the world. My advice to you today is to hold on to that sense of purpose. If you're looking for a secret to life, you probably won't find it. But if you're looking for the potential and the commonality of human experience, you'll find that there's more power in the human heart than all the gigabytes technology can provide you. It was William Faulkner who said in accepting the Nobel Prize, and I quote, "I believe that man will not merely endure, he will prevail. He is immortal, not because he alone among creatures has an inexhaustible voice, but because he has a soul, a spirit capable of compassion, sacrifice, and endurance." In the face of the unspeakable evil your generation has recently witnessed, Faulkner's statement about the spirit of man, about the capability for compassion, sacrifice, and endurance, may be in doubt. As a matter of fact, that sentiment is at the core of a raging intellectual debate in this country at this moment between the so-called neocons, the neoconservatives, and the realists who see the need for idealism. For we are being told, those in my profession, that it is our notion of compassion, sacrifice, and endurance that has made us, as a nation, the target. And if we are to prevail, we must understand that man is basically evil and must be constrained. This debate and the outcome of that debate is going to determine a great deal, if not everything, about the nation we become and the lives you are able to live. Those of you who graduate today from this particular university, this particular college, with its emphasis on communication and the arts, have a great deal to do with the outcome of that debate. Will we be a nation that looks inward, smugly in the certainty of our own decisions, intolerant of the differences in culture, religion, and governance that exist in this world? Are we going to remain an open, tolerant society that still believes that compassion and sacrifice and endurance are essential characteristics of a great nation who finds itself, without having sought it, I might add, as the indispensable nation in the world? When I meet with my counterparts, whether it's Jacques Chirac or any other leader in Europe or anywhere around the world, and they start to lecture me about the responsibilities of a superpower, I try to get them to understand that America and the American people do not view this as some great boon to us. The folks in my home state, the folks in this state, do not like the notion that we are responsible for every other nation's fate in the minds of every other nation. This is not a status we sought, but it's a responsibility that is ours. And as I said, The issue is, and it is not on the front pages of the Times and the Post and the Globe, but the underlying issue, the intellectual debate, and ideas are what change nations, is whether or not compassion and tolerance are a detriment or an asset for this great nation to possess. And I, as one, refuse to believe that mankind is fundamentally evil and that simply keeping evil in check should be the extent of our goal as a nation and as individuals. I grew up with the lessons taught by my parents, gentle and generous people, quick to offer help and very slow to judge, but possessed of one absolutely raw notion, a raw intolerance, an instinctive outrage for the abuse of power, at injustice inflicted upon the powerless at the hands of the powerful, whether it's a man striking a woman or a nation engaging in genocide to subjugate its people. From a generation that looked genuine and overpowering evil in the eye, my parents' generation stared down Hitler, Stalin, the Holocaust, and they did not blink. They did not yield to the influences and abuse of power. The intolerance of absolute power, any kind of power, and the closely related values of personal integrity, of respect for individual autonomy, of responsibility to family and community, was the foundation I brought with me to the United States Senate. And those are the values I wanted to express in my career. And it is my prayer that they will be yours as well. For ultimately, it's how we will be judged, in my view. There is one additional point I'd like to make to you, and it's this. Whatever success you achieve, and many of you will achieve inordinate success, and you will become known beyond that which anyone would ever think is capable of being known. And with it, you will find yourself subject to not only critics, which we all should be, but subject to being caricatured when you fall, when you make a mistake. And without your personal integrity, without your reputation, you will find you have nothing. Because if you become successful, rest assured that your integrity will be questioned at some point, and at that point, it's not likely to be the facts that rescue you. It is much more likely to be the reputation you took into the endeavor that rescues you. What I'm trying to convey to you is that no matter what challenges or uncertainty you face at any time in life, over time, if you rely on the basic values and apply them consistently, your commitment will see you through both the good and the bad times in your own eyes and in the eyes of others. And that's not a promise produced simply to suit the spirit of a college commencement. It's a promise pulled from the pages of my own life and the life of, I suspect, many on this stage and behind you. For with each of our good times and our bad, and we've all had them, God knows life has dealt all of us a few blows. I will not forget either that I volunteered for the sum that I got. But in a very personal way, it was the challenge to my integrity, and I suspect others as well. That was both the most bitter and the most heartening. Bitter because it wounded me to the core, but heartening because it drew the immediate, unreserved support of my family, my friends, my colleges, my law school, my classmates, and my colleagues in the Senate. And ultimately the people in my home state who trusted my lifelong commitment to the principles I have enunciated. And that's why I want to emphasize to you, some of you are going to be on a tightrope. Some of you are going to be in a high wire act because some of you are extremely talented. And in this era of mass worldwide communication, people will take pride in making you and breaking you very, very quickly. And knowing who you are, knowing what you believe, and never allowing that inner understanding to weaken will always be your most enduring defense against life's challenges and your own frailties. So let me say in conclusion, for better or worse, this is the world you inherit. Like my dear mom says, you can do anything. So it's up to you. Let your generation be the one to bring us to a time when we stand on principle and are moved to action by the power of our words and our ideals. When we put a premium on personal integrity and enduring values. Let your generation be the one to bring us to a time when the decisions we make individually and as a community reflect those values, including reflected in the work that you're about to undertake. And let your generation be the one that harnesses the explosive energy of this digital world, but keeps its feet firmly planted in its analog roots. I look at you now, safe in the environment that nurtures creativities and new ideas, and it takes all my strength to refrain from quoting Bob Hope's famous commencement speech at Georgetown. When I was graduating, I did not go to Georgetown. When he looked out at the crowd and said, he stood up, he was introduced, it was in the middle of Vietnam after the Tet Offensive. And he's introduced to this august body, graduating students and dignitaries and parents. He walked to the podium, he looked out at all of them and said, "Don't go." And he sat down. That was the entire speech. I'm tempted to say to you, don't go. But we need you to go. For God's sake, we need you to go. If there is any endeavor, any profession beyond mine of politics that needs people with ideals and standards and a commitment to the values that you've learned at the feet of your parents, it's the one all of you are about to enter, whether it's in advertising, mass communications, public relations, arts, literature. My God, if we cannot count on you to be truthful, possess integrity, and be willing to judge everything other than by the bottom line, then we're in deep trouble. So let your generation adopt as its anthem, in my view, what I think is presumptuous in me to a group of artists and potential poets and communicators to suggest, being surrounded by your professors, suggest what, were I your age, what I think should be adopted your anthem. I'm always quoting Seamus Heaney and other Irish poets. I've apologized to the poets behind me. Everybody thinks I quote them because I'm Irish. That's not the reason. I quote them because they're the best. Seamus Heaney has a stanza in his poem, The Cure at Troy, that in light of what your generation has recently witnessed and the evil we must conquer, as our parents conquered Nazi Germany, as my generation went a long way to conquering the Bull Connors of the world. What you should adopt, in my view, as your anthem is the stanza in the poem that says, "History teaches us not to hope on this side of the grave, but then, once in a lifetime, that longed-for tidal wave of justice rises up, and hope and history rhyme." My wish for you is that your generation catches that wave. Thank you.